Hello guys and gals, it's Soulfax here, and you're watching another War Thunder video, this time with some fancy editing techniques. In this video I'm going to be showing you two replays of the same tank brought to me by the same person. The tanks are the M4A3E2, Jesus Christ, that's a mouthful, M4A3E2 Assault Tank Jumbo Sherman. This is basically the modified version of the Jumbo Sherman. In the case of the 76mm Sherman, it is a field modification, and in this version it is an actual factory modification that was created for a very specific purpose. Now, both these replays were sent to me by the same person, and yes, you've guessed it, I don't know how, but congratulations, you guessed it, they were sent to me by Mr. jrhindo, to whom I referred to as Jeff in the last video, but I'm going to be calling him Jeremy because it just happens to be his real name. So let's get down to both of these replays. I'm not going to be showing you both of the replays at the same time because that would just be unnecessarily confusing. So here's the first replay. This is a realistic battle match on the White Fortress map, and Mr. Jeremy is driving in his M4A3E2 Sherman Jumbo Assault Tank. God, that's a mouthful. So I'm just going to be calling it Jumbo, the Sherman Jumbo, or some variation of the Sherman and the Jumbo. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the M4A2E3 Sherman, that's just wrong, M4A3E2 Sherman Jumbo was created for a very specific purpose. Around 1943, the Allies knew that if they wanted to liberate France, or just Paris, they needed to go through Normandy. And at that point in time, the Germans were already fortifying Normandy, expecting some sort of attack, and they were fortifying with some very, very big guns and some very, very highly armored bunkers. So the Americans knew that the M4 Sherman at its current state isn't just going to cut it, that it needed some sort of heavy tank to break through the front lines and assault those fortified positions from up close. And while the M26 Pershing was originally intended to do that, the development of the M26 Pershing wasn't going all that well. It was delayed all the way over to 1945 when it just barely reached Europe for the end of the war. So they basically needed a stopgap design, and that's where a modified version of the M4A3 Sherman came in. What the Americans did is they basically took a standard M4A3 Sherman and they added additional armor to it, and everything else remained the same. That is both the gearbox, the transmission, the drive wheels, the suspension, the tracks, the engine, everything else remained completely the same, including the gun. What they did is they added additional 25mm of front plate armor, which brought it up to 102mm of armor sloped at 47 degrees from the vertical, which means that this thing had a better frontal armor both in theory and in practice than a freaking Tiger, and comparable frontal armor to even a Panther. Secondly, they redesigned the turret and they made it so it's an incredible 177mm at the front and 125mm at the side, which means that this thing could basically not be penetrated through the turret by anything that the Germans could field at that time. This tank was so successful at the landing in Normandy that even General George Patton requested a few of these tanks, and out of 150 tanks that were built for the landing of Normandy, none of those reached his hands. So what did he do? He just took some armor plates from the Shermans that were destroyed at the beach and welded them onto existing Shermans. So that is how we got the field modified 76mm Shermans. And that is basically the history of the Jumbo Shermans. It's an amazing machine both in real life and in game, so let's talk a little bit about what we have in game. So after hearing me talk praises of this tank for a good part of 5 minutes, you might be thinking to yourself that this tank can be good in War Thunder, but it might just not be good in War Thunder because, well, Gaijin never gives us the good thing. You might be wrong, because this tank looks to be pretty freaking awesome, but of course it's got its flaws. Now, the biggest flaw on this tank is definitely the cannon. Now, while the armor can easily bounce a shot from a Tiger unless he catches you from the side or shoots you in the gunner's machine gun on the hull, and the turret is basically nigh unpenetrable by anything, even at 5.7, the cannon is a big letdown. The cannon is your bog standard Sherman 75mm M3 cannon that you see on the first Sherman and that you see on the last Sherman before the first 76mm Sherman. Now, that's a weird and convoluted sentence if I ever heard one. So basically the cannon isn't very good. If you ever get bumped out to 5.7 in this tank, which is bound to happen, it's gonna be a very, very hard time for you, because even though tanks can't penetrate you, and if you angle this armor you really, really don't stand a good chance of being penetrated by the enemy, you can't penetrate them back. So it's just basically a stalemate. You just shoot at each other and nothing happens. With this tank, even though it's quote-unquote a heavy tank and it's labeled a heavy tank in the game, you really need to try and flank, just like Mr. Jeremy here is doing. So Jeremy here has already picked up a few kills while I was rambling on about the history and the specifications, that's a weird word, specifications of this tank, and he's done that by actually flanking. Now, while this tank is labeled as a heavy tank, it's still not as heavy and as slow as some other heavy tanks in the game. The top speed isn't overwhelming, it's only 35 kilometers an hour, which means that you're not going to get anywhere fast, but still, the tank accelerates relatively fast and it's got a nice, quote-unquote, nice power-to-weight ratio, so it's not all that slow, but it's not the fastest tank in the game. So you might have saw him just get a very lucky kill on, oh well, I say very lucky, because he got a one-shot kill on a KV-2 shooting APCR. That's a team in this tank. You really need to shoot APCR because the standard ammo's got only 100 millimeters of penetration, and against most tanks in the game, only at point-blank range, you're really going to need to switch to that APCR. And the APCR, while it's got a lot more penetration, it does not like sloped armor, it does not like bent armor. Bent armor, is that even a word? No, that's not a word. Sloped armor is the term for that. And it doesn't like distances. So basically, while the APCR has a lot more penetration, it's basically a situational thing. Basically, I said basically a lot. Really, didn't I? That's a lot of basicallys in this clip. But yeah, enough of the theory crafting and dingle-daggle jibber-jabber. I was just retarded, okay. What we got? Let's talk about the replay a little bit. So if you've been watching the replay, which I hope you did, you're gonna see that Mr. Jeremy already picked up a few kills. I think I counted 2 and 2 kill assists, and he's been holding this position for quite some time, hoping that some tank is gonna come around that corner and bounce off the awesome armor that is this tank. But fortunately, alas, nothing happened. So he needs to move up here because of 2 reasons. So firstly, there is an SU-152 waiting for people to approach the A side, and the reason people want to approach the A side is because the enemy managed to capture the A side. If you've been watching this replay, I hope you did again, you could have seen that Mr. Jeremy managed to kill another, well, the first SU-152 that he encountered, and he got him from the side. Now this SU-152 thinks he's being very clever, decides to back off this cliff to see if he can get a shot, but alas, it's not gonna happen because, well, the Jumbo Sherman is awfully tall vehicle, and he gets the first shot into him, kills a lot of crew members. The second shot bounces off his vehicle. Now he turns his attention to the cap circle, maybe trying to eliminate that guy that was in the cap circle. The Sherman Flyfly advances and basically becomes a meat shield for Mr. Jeremy because he gets completely annihilated by the ZSU anti-aircraft cannon that is so commonly used as a tank destroyer that it's not even funny anymore. But yeah, he basically was a meat shield for him because he alerted him of the presence of that ZSU. He put a few MG shots into that tank, and now the ZSU has backed off behind the rock. But look at this, there's another T-34 here that's coming to assist this SU-152, and it's gonna be very funny because the T-34 can't penetrate this tank from this range. Now, he goes in, he puts one shot into him, and the SU-152 thinks, now it's my chance, I'm gonna do it. He comes around the corner, points his gun, and nope, denied. He almost pointed his gun at Mr. Jeremy, but unfortunately Mr. Jeremy's got better reflexes, and that's his 3rd and 4th kill in this match. Now that T-34 that's managed to capture the A point is now trying to get out of the A point, but unfortunately he exposed his exposed rear end to Mr. Jeremy, who puts 3 shots into him, setting him on fire all 3 times, which means that he can safely turn around and go somewhere else. Couple of minutes later, Jeremy is still vigilantly watching the cap point, hoping that somebody's gonna pop up and try to engage him while he's basically hauled down here. And he's constantly looking behind him, and unfortunately, as you saw at the beginning of this short clip, he looked behind him, there was nothing, he looks behind him again, there's ZSU. Isn't that just typical? Isn't that just typical? ZSUs in real life were used as tank destroyers. I don't know if you knew this, but there was a whole battalion of them in the 76th Regiment of the Red Army. There was a whole battalion of them that were used as tank destroyers because, well, you know, just real life worked like that. And this was totally not sarcasm, and I'm totally not lying. And ZSUs were not used as tank destroyers because they were not tank destroyers. Christ almighty. I hope that my sarcasm didn't leave you any permanent brain damage, but sometimes when I see bullshit, I really have the utmost need to call out the said bullshit. But yeah, moving on to the second replay, so this is again Mr. Jeremy playing in a realistic battle match on the Poland map, and he's driving, again, his M4A3E2... why do I even try anymore? What the hell? This is the Jumbo German. This is the Jumbo Sherman, not the Jumbo German. Oh, that's fucking funny. It's the Jumbo Sherman, and he's done the smart thing. He decided to advance through the middle of the town. There's a lot of Jumbo Shermans in this match. I didn't expect Sherman Jumbos. That's a better way to call these things. Sherman Jumbos. He advanced down the middle of the map because, well, frankly, there's only a few actual flanking spots and flanking routes that he can use in this match. One of them is, of course, flanking on the other side, the south side of the map around the lake, and the other one would be flanking around the north side of the map around the city. The first target he's encountered is a side-on T-3045 who's trying to scuttle through the city. He puts one shot into him, sets him on fire and damages his engine, but somebody comes around and ninjas the kill. But that's just what happens when you play in a Sherman Jumbo. The 75mm cannon, like I mentioned earlier in this video, isn't all that potent, and I would actually call it impotent. But this is the part of the video where I'm supposed to say the fun is gonna start now, but this is, well, in my opinion, it's a very stale and a very boring confrontation, because let me just set the scene. So he's kind of in the best possible spot ever. He's protecting his side armor and he's angling his tank so the second part of his side armor isn't being shown. He's only showing his very thick frontal armor, and the only tank at this battle rating in this match that has a chance to penetrate this tank when it's angling and positioned like this is Dicker Maxes. Even though there's quite a few Dicker Maxes in this match, none of them actually line up at the other side of the street here and try to put shots into enemy tanks that are coming from that side of the street. So basically, what we're watching here is an endless slugfest of tanks that can't penetrate each other, because on the other side of the street there's a T-3045 that is shooting at Mr. Jeremy, and the T-3045 has, well, it has very good armor. In all reality, it's one of the best all-around medium tanks in the game, because it's got armor, it's got mobility, and it's got a very good cannon. But the thing is, just like that T-3045 struggles to penetrate Mr. Jeremy, Mr. Jeremy is struggling to penetrate that T-3045, and even though the penetration on the AP rounds of the 75mm cannon have a chance of penetrating the T-3045 at close ranges, and he's still mostly firing armor piercing, the armor piercing really dislikes sloped armor, and the T-3485 is all about sloped armor. But the fun is gonna start now, because the boring parts are over. I mentioned just earlier there's quite a few Dicker Maxes in this match. Now one is going to be to the left side of Mr. Jeremy, but that's not the one you want to be paying attention to. Now what's special about Dicker Max is that at 4.3 battle rating, it's got plus 200mm of penetration, and he just managed to easily penetrate through the angle front of a Sherman Jumbo. That is more than 150mm of armor when it's angled like that. Now, luckily for Mr. Jeremy, a Dicker Max only killed one of his crew members, which is very interesting, but this is what's more interesting. There's a T-3045 behind him, and ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the worst T-3085 driver in the game. So the first shots he puts go straight into Mr. Jeremy's side armor, and now he goes and ass hugs him, but at this point in time, he's already received 2 APCR shells straight in the turret and point blank range, so he cannot shoot back. So instead of trying to angle his tank or do something, he just repeatedly rams Mr. Jeremy's back hull. And now, from the spawn of Mr. Jeremy's team, there's an SPAA acting as tank destroyer that just completely annihilates this poor T-3045. But another interesting fact is, while all of this was going on, another T-3045, the one he's been fighting for the last couple of minutes, has been shooting at him constantly and only managed to score one penetrating hit, which didn't kill a single crew member. I don't know how he's still alive. So he decides to move up in town here, and now he's gonna encounter what appears to be a Panzerjäger 4.5. I really don't know how to call that thing. But that thing also doesn't have very good chance of penetrating him, so he moves to the side, and finally he gets one of those Dicker Maxes from the rear. Now this Dicker Max was being very brave. He charged into town. Unfortunately, he ran into one of those tanks who, well, just any tank in town, because he's a tank destroyer. What the hell are you doing here in town on Poland? He's gonna get himself very easily shreked here by both the cannon and the MG on the top of the roof of the hull of the turret armor. What? I don't know. But now it's time to deal with that Panzer IV. Now, Mr. Jeremy here is being very cautious about that Panzer IV, because that's not a Panzer IV, that's a Panzer IV 5 Jaeger thingy something, a tank destroyer. He's being very cautious because while this thing cannot penetrate his frontal armor, he still can somehow penetrate the side armor. So he puts one shot into his turret and then puts a shot into his tracks, disabling them, and now he can easily go around him and finish him off. But from the other side of the map also comes an, I don't know what tank this is that is shooting at him. This is some kind of SPAA again, but he's not going to be able to steal Mr. Jeremy's kills, because Mr. Jeremy says, nope, I'm going to go to the side of this tank and put one final shot into him and make him blow up. Now that Mr. Jeremy has dealt with that Panzer IV Jagdpanzer German tank destroyer. It's a German tank destroyer. I got that one right. It's a German tank destroyer for sure. Now that that tank has been dealt with, the middle of the town is completely clear of the German stellinium side. You get it? German stellinium? Because it's Germany and Russia and it's German stellinium. And the Freedom T side is free to advance and attack the enemy cap point. You get it? Best jokes ever. German stellinium and Freedom T. Best jokes ever. So horrible, I apologize. But as Mr. Jeremy is moving through the middle of the town and making periodical turns and checks to see if anybody's waiting in ambush, trying to ambush people going to the enemy cap point, he fancies himself as a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, because at this point in time there's quite a few aircraft from the enemy team that are littering the skies, and he sees what appears to be a Messerschmitt 310 Hornet. Tries to take it down, but unfortunately for him, this thing is quite durable. It misses a couple of shots, probably puts in a couple of shots, but the Messerschmitt 310 Hornet manages to fly above him and go somewhere else to drop its payload. So now he's getting quite close to the enemy cap point, and at this point in time he can again expect to see enemy tanks around the corner. So as he turns the corner, there is not an enemy tank, but it's a friendly Thunderbolt, a British premium tier 3 cannon equipped with 76mm, great 76mm cannon. But as he moves forwards to him, he sees in just a second, come on, notice it, okay, he notices that, nope, not there, there, he notices that that Thunderbolt is stopping and aiming somewhere, and from the corner appears a captured German premium KV-170 756, I think? Maybe 756 or maybe 765. It is basically a captured KV-1E with additional armor plating at the hull and a different German turret with the cupola and a 75mm German cannon. And this tank would have proved to be a great challenge for Mr. Jeremy if he had fought it at range and alone, but with the help of this Thunderbolt, it's going to be a very easy task to kill this tank. Unfortunately, the kill doesn't go to him, but look at this! Again, Mr. Jeremy finds himself with a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, and this time he actually takes down this pesky M4A3E2 Hornet. I think it's a Messerschmitt 310 Hornet. He takes him down and gets himself his first and I think the only anti-aircraft kill in this match. So after freeing the skies with that pesky M310, ME310, Mr. Jeremy has basically won this match for his team. I mean, he didn't win this match with that kill. The match is already kind of won because while the friendly tanks are in abundance, the enemy tanks are basically non-existent, and the match is practically over. So Mr. Jeremy in these two matches have played extremely well and showed us all how to use this assault tank very efficiently while using his armor and dealing around the fact that the cannon is not all that great for that battle rating. So I thank you, Mr. Jeremy, for sending me these replays. It's been my pleasure to review them and to actually make a video out of them. My name has been Soulfax, and if you enjoyed this video, leave me a like or something, or a comment saying me that you enjoyed this video. If you didn't enjoy this video, feel free to leave me a dislike and a spiteful and hateful comment in the comment section. So yeah, I've been Soulfax, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.